The space around the Kepler border station had been quiet for months. Admiral Zextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. His forearms rested behind his back as he reviewed patrol reports on his datapad. Nothing interesting ever happened out here on the edge of Imperial space. The duty officer's voice cut through the peaceful silence. "Admiral, we have an unknown contact. Distance 40,000 kilometers and closing." Zextar's blue skin darkened with irritation. Pirates again, most likely. They seemed to think the border was some kind of safe haven. Classification? Unknown, sir. The ship appeared without warning. No jump signature, no wormhole residue. It just appeared. That got the Admiral's attention. He walked to the sensor station, his heavy boots clicking on the metal floor. The display showed a single contact moving toward them at steady speed. The ship's design was completely unfamiliar. "Run it through the database," Zextar ordered. "Already did, sir. No match. The hull configuration is unlike anything we've seen. Angular design, lots of weapon ports, and the energy signature is strange." Zextar studied the readings. The unknown vessel was large, about the size of an Imperial cruiser, but the power output was impossible. No ship that size should generate that much energy. Probably a sensor malfunction. "Send a patrol ship to investigate." Captain Velnox, his second-in-command, approached. Her scales rippled with concern. "Sir, perhaps we should call for reinforcements first. Protocol suggests error. Protocol is for dealing with known threats." Zextar interrupted. "This is probably some primitive scout ship with faulty engines. One patrol ship will be enough." The patrol ship Swift Strike launched from the station's docking bay. As it approached the unknown vessel, more details became visible on the main screen. The ship was definitely not from any known species. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with no decorative elements. Everything about it screamed military efficiency. "Swift Strike is requesting instructions, sir," the communications officer reported. "Tell them to follow standard first contact procedures. Demand identification and compliance with Imperial law." The patrol ship's captain came on the screen. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Mordek of the Imperial Fleet. You are in violation of Imperial space. Identify yourself immediately and prepare to be boarded." For several minutes there was no response. Then the unknown ship's communication system activated. The voice that came through was flat, emotionless, and spoke in a language the translators struggled with. "You are in violation of Terran space. Withdraw immediately." Zextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Terran space?" He'd never heard of any Terrans. "Tell them they're mistaken. This sector has belonged to the Empire for over 200 years. The patrol ship relayed the message. The response came back quickly, clearer this time as the translators adjusted. "Your Empire's claims are irrelevant. This is Terran space. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures." The bridge fell silent. No one had ever spoken to the Imperial fleet like that. Not pirates, not rebels, not even the few species that had initially resisted conquest. Everyone knew the Empire's power. "Sir?" Captain Velnox asked quietly. Zextar's anger flared. "Some primitive species thought they could threaten the Empire. Tell Swift Strike to move in and prepare boarding parties. If they resist, disable their engines." On the main screen, they watched the patrol ship accelerate toward the unknown vessel. Suddenly, energy readings spiked across all sensors. The alien ship's weapon systems had activated. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out, his voice shaking. "Those energy readings? They're off the scale. That ship is generating more power than our entire battle group." Zextar stared at the display. "That couldn't be right. Double-check those readings." "Already did, sir. 3 times. The weapons on that ship? I've never seen anything like them." Before anyone could respond, the unknown ship moved. It didn't turn slowly like most vessels. It simply rotated in place impossibly fast, bringing its weapons to bear on the approaching patrol ship. "Swift Strike. Abort approach immediately," Zextar shouted into his communicator. Too late. A beam of pure energy lanced out from the alien vessel. It struck the patrol ship's shields and passed through them as if they weren't there. The beam hit the ship's hull and began cutting through it like a hot knife through ice. "Shields are useless." Captain Mordek's voice crackled with panic. "The beam is cutting right through our armor. We're losing hull integrity." Zextar watched in horror as the alien weapon carved a precise line across his patrol ship's hull. But instead of destroying the vessel, the beam stopped just short of critical systems. A warning shot. "All ships, battle stations." Zextar ordered. "Surround that vessel." The unknown ship's communication system activated again. This time the voice carried a hint of something that might have been amusement. Admiral Zextar of the 47th Imperial Border Fleet, your patrol ship, Swift Strike, has been disabled but not destroyed. This demonstrates our restraint, not our limitations. Your fleet consists of 1 heavy cruiser, 3 light cruisers, and 12 patrol ships. Your flagship carries 847 crew members. Your weapons are plasma-based with a maximum effective range of 50,000 kilometers. Should I continue? The bridge went dead silent. How did they know his name? How did they know his fleet composition? Most importantly, how did they know classified information about Imperial weapons? Who are you? Zextar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation ship Indomitable. You are trespassing in human space, Admiral. This is your final warning. Zextar's mind raced. Humans? He'd never heard of them. But somehow they knew everything about the Empire. They had weapons that made Imperial technology look primitive, and they spoke as if they were equals to the greatest military force in the galaxy. Captain Chen, he said carefully, perhaps there has been some misunderstanding. The Empire has no record of any human territories in this sector. The Empire has no record of many things, Admiral. Your intelligence services are not as effective as you believe. We have been watching you for quite some time. The implications hit him like a physical blow. If these humans had been watching the Empire, studying them, learning their weaknesses, what do you want? He asked. We want you to leave, now. Take your ships and return to Imperial space. Do not come back. Zextar looked around his bridge. His officers stared at him, waiting for orders. The smart thing would be to withdraw and report this to High Command. But the Empire didn't retreat from single ships, no matter how advanced they seemed. I cannot simply abandon this sector, he said finally. Then you will face the consequences of your choice, Admiral. Power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted out of the system, or we will remove you by force. On the main screen, more energy signatures appeared around the human ship. Weapon ports that had been dark suddenly blazed with power. The Indomitable looked like a star about to explode. Zextar realized he was holding his breath. In 30 years of service, he had never faced anything like this. The Empire's enemies were always inferior, always desperate, always doomed. But looking at that alien ship with its impossible weapons and casual threats, he felt something he hadn't experienced since he was a junior officer facing his first battle. Fear. All ships, he said slowly, maintain distance and defensive positions. Do not fire unless fired upon. He opened a direct channel to the human ship. Captain Chen, I am willing to discuss terms. The response came immediately. There are no terms to discuss, Admiral. Only a choice. Leave now or be removed. Zextar stared at the tactical display. His fleet could overwhelm a single ship, surely. But those weapon readings, that casual confidence, the detailed knowledge of Imperial capabilities, something was very wrong here, and Admiral Zextar was beginning to suspect that the galaxy had just become a much more dangerous place. 3 hours later, Admiral Zextar found himself in a situation he had never imagined. The Empire's finest diplomatic corps was being assembled for an emergency first contact session. Not because they had discovered a new species, but because a new species had discovered them. Ambassador Kreval arrived on the flagship within the hour, his ceremonial robes flowing behind him as he strutted onto the bridge. The tall, thin alien had conducted first contact with dozens of primitive species. He expected this to be no different. Where are these humans? He demanded. I assume they've already submitted a formal surrender. Zextar pointed to the main screen where the human ship hung motionless in space. They're waiting for us to leave. Waiting for us to... Kreval's translator struggled with the concept. I don't understand. Neither do I, Zextar admitted. But I suggest you review the sensor logs before you talk to them. While the ambassador studied the recordings of the encounter, Zextar received a priority message from Imperial Command. High Admiral Thexmore's image appeared on his private screen. Zextar, what is this nonsense about unknown aliens in your sector? Sir, they're not unknown. They know us very well. Too well. Explain. Zextar summarized the encounter, watching his superior's expression change from irritation to disbelief to concern. You're telling me a single alien ship disabled one of our patrol vessels and threatened your entire fleet? Yes, sir. And they knew classified information about our weapons, fleet composition, and personnel records. High Admiral Thexmore was quiet for a long moment. I'm sending reinforcements. The dreadnought, Inevitable Victory, and her escort group. Don't engage until they arrive. With respect, sir, I don't think more ships will help. These humans seem to know everything about our capabilities. Impossible. Our intelligence network is the finest in the galaxy. The connection ended, leaving Zextar to wonder if that was actually true. Ambassador Kreval approached, his face pale. Admiral, I've reviewed the sensor data. These weapon signatures, they're completely outside our understanding of physics. Can you establish meaningful contact with them? I'll certainly try. Set up the standard diplomatic channel. The main screen split to show Captain Chen's face. She appeared human enough. Oh, whoa. 2 eyes, a mouth, skin that looked similar to several known species. But there was something in her expression that made Zexatar uncomfortable. She looked at them the way a scientist might look at an interesting specimen. Ambassador Kreval of the Galactic Empire, the diplomat began, using his most formal tone. I greet you in the name of His Imperial Majesty Valthak the Eternal, ruler of 1,000 worlds, master of the stars. Captain Chen nodded politely. Captain Sarah Chen, Terran Federation Navy. I assume you want to negotiate the terms of your withdrawal? Kreval blinked in confusion. In 50 years of diplomacy, no one had ever skipped the formal protocols. That is, perhaps we should begin with proper introductions. Your species is unknown to our records. Where do you come from? Earth, Sol System, about 40 light-years from here. And your government? The Terran Federation. We represent approximately 12 billion humans across 47 systems. The numbers hit the bridge like a physical blow. 47 systems? That was larger than most Imperial sectors, I see, Kreval said carefully. And when did your people achieve interstellar flight? Depends how you count it. We've had FTL capability for about 300 years. We've been a spacefaring civilization for much longer. 300 years? Zextar interrupted. That's impossible. Our survey ships have mapped this entire region. We would have detected your expansion. Captain Chen smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Admiral, your survey ships are designed to find primitive civilizations and resource-rich worlds. You're not looking for peers. You're looking for targets. The accusation hung in the air. Ambassador Kreval tried to regain control of the conversation. Captain Chen, the Empire has always been open to peaceful contact with new species. Perhaps we can arrange a formal meeting to discuss mutual interests. What mutual interests would those be, Ambassador? Trade, cultural exchange, technological cooperation? You mean the same cooperation you offered to the Zephyrians before you conquered them? Or the cultural exchange you had with the Helix Confederation before you absorbed their territory? Zextar felt his blood run cold. The Zephyrian conquest was classified information. The absorption of the Helix Confederation had happened over a century ago and was buried deep in Imperial archives. How do you know about that? He demanded. Captain Chen turned her attention to him. Admiral, as I said, we've been watching you. For decades. We know about your expansion patterns, your diplomatic methods, your military doctrine. We know about the resistance movements you've crushed and the species you've civilized out of existence. That's impossible, Ambassador Kreval sputtered. Your security is designed to keep your own people in line, not to keep outsiders from watching. You've never faced a peer opponent, Ambassador. You don't know how to hide from one. Captain Chen stood up from her chair and the camera angle widened to show the bridge behind her. The technology was clearly advanced, but more importantly, the crew moved with the precision of veterans. These weren't explorers or merchants. They were soldiers. Let me show you something, Chen said. She gestured to someone off-screen, and the display changed. Suddenly, the diplomatic channel was showing detailed schematics of Imperial ships. Not basic configurations that might be observed from a distance, but internal layouts, weapon specifications, shield frequencies. This is the technical readout for your flagship, Admiral. Magnificent class heavy cruiser. Commissioned 15 years ago. Maximum speed, weapon loadout, crew complement, and... She paused. Current shield rotation frequency. Zextar stared at the display in horror. Those specifications were classified at the highest levels. Even most of his own crew didn't have access to that information. Where did you get this? We've been watching you, Admiral, learning, preparing. Preparing for what? Captain Chen's expression grew serious. For the day when the Empire decided to expand in our direction. We've seen what you do to species that can't defend themselves. We wanted to make sure we could. Ambassador Kreval tried to salvage the situation. Captain, surely there's been some misunderstanding. The Empire doesn't seek conflict with peaceful species. No, you just seek submission. There's a difference. Chen manipulated something on her console and the display changed again. This time it showed Imperial fleet movements across dozens of systems. Current positions, patrol routes, supply lines. Information that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. Your 15th Fleet is currently engaged in peacekeeping operations in the Tau Ceti region. Your 22nd Fleet is blockading the Rigel system until they accept Imperial protection. Your 8th Fleet is conducting training exercises suspiciously close to the independent worlds of the Vega Alliance. Each revelation was like a punch to the gut. Not only did the humans know about current Imperial operations, they understood the true nature of those operations. We know what you are, Chen continued. The question is, what are you going to do about us? Zextar found his voice. What do you want? We want to be left alone. We have no interest in your empire, your expansion, or your version of galactic civilization. But we also won't tolerate threats to our territory or our people. And if the Empire disagrees with your territorial claims? Captain Chen's smile returned, cold and confident. Then the Empire will learn why humanity survived long enough to claim territory in the first place. Ambassador Kreval leaned forward. Captain, perhaps you don't understand the scope of Imperial power. We have thousands of ships, millions of troops, the resources of 1,000 worlds. And you've never faced an enemy that could fight back on equal terms, Chen replied. Every war you've fought has been against primitives with inferior technology and no strategic depth. You've never faced an opponent that could hurt you. You're a single ship Aku. I'm a single ship that disabled your patrol vessel without breaking stride. I'm a single ship that knows your fleet compositions, your tactical doctrines, and your strategic weaknesses. I'm a single ship from a civilization that has been preparing for this encounter for decades. She stood up from her chair. Ambassador, Admiral, you need to understand something. Humanity didn't develop in a peaceful galaxy where the biggest threat was competing with neighbors for resources. We evolved in a crucible. We learned to fight or die, and we learned very, very well. The transmission ended, leaving the Imperial officers staring at a blank screen. Sir? Captain Velnox asked quietly. Orders? Zextar looked around his bridge. These humans knew everything about the Empire, but the Empire knew nothing about them. They had weapons that seemed impossible, intelligence that should have been impossible to gather, and an attitude that suggested they weren't intimidated by Imperial power. For the first time in his career, Admiral Zextar wondered if the Empire had finally encountered something it couldn't conquer. The reinforcements arrived 6 hours later. High Admiral Thexmore had not sent just the promised dreadnought. The inevitable victory was accompanied by 12 heavy cruisers, 20 destroyers, and a full support fleet. It was enough firepower to conquer a star system. Admiral Zextar watched the massive formation take position around the human ship. The Indomitable sat motionless in the center of the Imperial fleet, surrounded but seemingly unconcerned. Impressive display. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channel. How many ships is that? 47? 45, Zextar corrected automatically, then realized what he'd done. Thank you for the confirmation, Admiral. My tactical officer had counted 46, but one of your destroyers was hidden behind the dreadnought's sensor shadow. High Admiral Thexmore's face appeared on the main screen, his expression grim. Human vessel. This is High Admiral Thexmore of the Imperial Fleet. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender immediately. Captain Chen appeared on the adjacent screen, looking relaxed in her command chair. High Admiral, you seem to have misunderstood the situation. This isn't a siege. This is a demonstration. A demonstration of what? Of why the Empire should leave human space alone. Thexmore's 4 eyes narrowed. You're one ship against 45. Even with advanced weapons, you cannot possibly— High Admiral, Chen interrupted gently. Would you like me to prove you wrong quickly, or would you prefer a more detailed lesson? The bridge fell silent. No one had ever spoken to a High Admiral like that. Thexmore's skin darkened with rage. You have 30 seconds to surrender before we open fire. Captain Chen sighed. Very well. The detailed lesson it is. On the main screen, the human ship began to change. Weapon ports that had been barely visible suddenly blazed with energy. The hull itself seemed to shift and flow as armor plates reconfigured. Most unsettling of all, the space around the ship began to distort. Admiral, the sensor officer called out, his voice shaking. I'm reading massive gravitational anomalies around the human vessel. It's like they're bending space itself. Impossible, Thexmore snapped. Open fire. All ships target the alien vessel. The Imperial fleet unleashed everything it had. Plasma cannons, particle beams, missile salvos, and energy torpedoes. The combined firepower could have destroyed a small moon. None of it reached the human ship. The distortion field around the Indomitable simply absorbed the incoming fire. Plasma bolts vanished into what looked like tears in space itself. Missiles detonated harmlessly against barriers that shouldn't exist. Energy beams bent away from their target as if space itself was protecting the human vessel. What is that? Zextar whispered. Gravitational manipulation, Captain Chen explained calmly. We bend space-time around our ships. Your weapons are following perfectly straight paths, but space itself is curved. From your perspective, we're untouchable. The Imperial barrage lasted for 2 full minutes before High Admiral Thexmore ordered a ceasefire. The human ship sat exactly where it had been, completely undamaged. Our turn, Captain Chen said. The human ship moved, not the slow, ponderous movement of large warships, but with the speed and precision of a fighter craft. It accelerated to impossible speeds, stopped instantly, changed direction without slowing down. The laws of physics seemed to be suggestions rather than rules. Target the closest cruiser, Chen ordered, her voice carrying clearly over the communication channel. Gravitational lance minimum power. A beam of invisible force lanced out from the human ship. It struck the Imperial cruiser Dominator amidships, and the massive warship simply came apart. Not an explosion, not a dramatic detonation. The ship's hull began separating at the molecular level, peeling apart like layers of an onion. Hull breach on all decks. The Dominator's captain screamed over the radio. We're losing structural integrity. The ship is falling apart. Gravitational weapons, Chen explained conversationally. We can adjust the fundamental forces that hold matter together. Very effective against ships that rely on conventional armor. The Dominator was now drifting in pieces, its crew evacuating in escape pods. The human weapon had torn it apart without killing anyone. A precise surgical destruction. Next demonstration, Chen announced. Target the destroyer Swift Revenge. Quantum torpedoes. This time the weapon was visible a shimmering projectile that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. It struck the destroyer's shields and passed right through them as if they weren't there. Shields are useless, the destroyer's captain reported. The torpedo penetrated our defenses and... Wait, it's inside our engine room, but it hasn't detonated. Quantum torpedoes exist in a state of superposition until they reach their target, Chen explained. They don't interact with shields or armor because they're not entirely in this dimension, until we collapse their wave function. The torpedo suddenly became fully real, and the destroyer's engines exploded. The ship was crippled but not destroyed, its crew alive but helpless. Third demonstration, Chen continued. Point defense systems. Please launch all remaining missiles at my ship. High Admiral Thexmore was too stunned to object. His fleet commanders, acting on standing orders, launched every missile they had. Hundreds of warheads streaked toward the human vessel. The Indomitable's response was beautiful and terrifying. Thousands of tiny energy pulses erupted from the ship's hull, each one precisely targeting an incoming missile. Every single warhead was destroyed before it traveled more than a kilometer from its launcher. Point defense grid, Chen explained. Quantum targeting systems with gravitational pulse weapons. We can track and destroy thousands of small targets simultaneously. The demonstration continued for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. In that time, the human ship systematically disabled 12 Imperial cruisers and 4 destroyers. Not destroyed, disabled. Each ship was crippled in a different way, showcasing a different weapon system. One cruiser had its weapons carved off by precision energy beams. Another found its engines fused into useless metal by some kind of molecular disruptor. A destroyer had its bridge carefully removed, leaving the crew unharmed but the ship uncontrollable. The dreadnought Inevitable Victory received special attention. The human ship approached it directly, ignoring the massive vessel's weapons. When the dreadnought fired its main guns at point-blank range, the shots simply curved around the human ship and struck empty space. Impressive firepower, Chen commented as she flew circles around the dreadnought, but predictable. Your targeting systems assume linear physics. Ours don't. A new type of weapon emerged from the human ship. It looked like a blade of pure energy, hundreds of meters long. With surgical precision, it began carving through the dreadnought's armor. "What are you doing?" High Admiral Thexmore demanded. "Demonstrating that your armor is irrelevant," Chen replied. The energy blade sliced through the dreadnought's hull like it was made of paper. But instead of cutting vital systems, it carved out decorative patterns, series spirals, and geometric shapes that served no purpose except to show off. When the demonstration ended, the human ship returned to its original position. Around it, the pride of the Imperial fleet floated helpless. Not a single crew member had been killed, but every ship was either disabled or decorated with proof of human superiority. "This concludes our demonstration," Captain Chen announced. "High Admiral, your fleet is equipped with escape pods and emergency supplies. I suggest you use them." Thexmore's voice was barely a whisper. "What are you?" "We're humans, High Admiral. We're the species that learned to fight in a galaxy that didn't care if we lived or died. We're the survivors." Chen's expression grew serious. "Your empire has never faced a real war. You've had conquest, expansion, the absorption of primitives. But you've never faced an enemy that could hurt you back. You don't know how to fight someone who can match your technology and exceed your tactics. What do you want?" "What I've wanted since this began. For you to leave. Take your ships, return to Imperial space, and don't come back." "And if the Empire refuses?" Captain Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "High Admiral, what you've seen today was a single ship using training weapons at minimum power. We have fleets. We have weapons that would horrify you. And we have a very simple philosophy. Leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. Threaten us and we'll remove the threat." She leaned forward in her chair. "The choice is yours. But understand this, Iwao. Humanity has survived things that would have destroyed your empire a dozen times over. We're still here because we learned a very important lesson. Sometimes the only way to have peace is to be so good at war that no one wants to fight you." The transmission ended, leaving the Imperial officers staring at the wreckage of their once mighty fleet. "Sir?" Captain Velnox asked quietly. "Orders?" High Admiral Thexmore looked around the bridge. Every screen showed disabled Imperial ships, their crews abandoning vessels that had been rendered useless by weapons they couldn't understand. "Signal the fleet," he said finally. "Begin evacuation procedures." "Sir, we're leaving, and we're going to recommend that the Empire find somewhere else to expand." The Imperial Intelligence Headquarters on Zephyros Prime was in chaos. Director Yexhal had called an emergency session after receiving High Admiral Thexmore's report. The most powerful analysts in the Empire were working around the clock to understand what had happened at the Kepler border. "Show me everything we know about these humans," Yexhal ordered. Analyst Prime Coltum activated the main display. "Sir, that's the problem. We know almost nothing. No record of first contact, no surveillance data, no intercepted communications. It's as if they appeared from nowhere. Impossible. No species develops interstellar capability without leaving traces. Show me their home system." The display changed to show the Sol system. "Here, sir. Approximately 40 light-years from the border incident. But our records show no advanced civilization there." "When was it last surveyed?" 73 years ago, sir. Standard survey protocol. The system was classified as primitive, single planet with early industrial civilization. The report recommended ignoring it for at least 2 centuries. Yexhal studied the old survey data. Carbon-based life forms, roughly compatible with standard galactic biochemistry, no space travel beyond their own moon. Recommend re-evaluation in 200 standard years. "Sir," Coltum said hesitantly, "I've been cross-referencing historical data. There are anomalies." "What kind of anomalies?" "Border conflicts that ended mysteriously. Pirates who suddenly stopped operating in certain sectors. Trade routes that were quietly abandoned without explanation." The director's interest sharpened. "Show me." The display filled with star charts spanning decades. Red markers indicated unexplained incidents across a vast region of space. 17 years ago, the Krolex Pirate Federation was operating in the Centauri sector. 12 major raids, standard pattern. Then they simply vanished. No distress calls, no wreckage, no survivors. Intelligence assumed they moved to easier targets. 15 years ago, the Helios Trading Consortium lost 3 cargo ships in the same region. All experienced captains all disappeared without a trace. The consortium quietly rerouted their convoys. 13 years ago, a rebel cell in the Rigel system claimed they had outside assistance in their fight against Imperial forces. The rebellion was crushed, but several commanders reported mysterious ship sightings before their defeat. Yexhal felt cold certainty settling in his stomach. They've been there all along, sir. The humans. They've been operating in that region for years. Watching us, studying us, preparing. He turned to his senior staff. How many times have we ignored isolated incidents because they seemed unimportant? Analyst Vexnor raised a tentacle. Sir, if I may, there's something else. I've been reviewing the technical specifications that Captain Chen displayed. The weapon signatures don't match anything in our databases, but there are theoretical frameworks that suggest what? That these technologies were developed for fighting something much more dangerous than the Empire. Yexhal stared at the younger analyst. Explain. Gravitational manipulation requires massive computational power and energy generation, far beyond normal space combat needs. The quantum torpedo technology is unnecessarily complex for fighting conventional ships. Their point defense systems are designed to handle thousands of simultaneous targets. Your point? Sir. These aren't weapons designed for conquest or territorial expansion. They're weapons designed for survival against overwhelming odds. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Director Yexhal activated his highest security clearance and called up the most classified databases in the Empire. Computer. Search for all references to extinct civilizations in human space. Cross-reference with unusual weapon signatures or unexplained phenomena. The computer worked for several minutes before responding. Classification level Alpha Black. Access restricted to Emperor and High Command only. Override. Emergency protocols. Director Authority Yexhal 77 Alpha. Override accepted. Displaying restricted data. The main screen filled with information that made everyone in the room step back. Ancient reports, scattered fragments, references to something called the Devourer War. Computer summarized the Devourer conflict. The Devourer War was a galactic-scale conflict that occurred approximately 800 to 1200 years ago. Combatants, various organic species versus an entity designated as the Devourers. Nature of Devourers, hive-minded silicon-based lifeforms with the ability to consume and convert organic matter and energy. Coltum's voice was barely a whisper. Consume entire star systems? Confirmed. Devourer forces demonstrated the ability to strip planets of all organic matter within standard cycles. Technology included self-replicating constructs, matter conversion, and weapons capable of stellar manipulation. What happened to them? Records incomplete. Final entries indicate coordinated resistance by multiple organic species. War ended approximately 800 years ago with presumed extinction of Devourer forces. Yexhal felt the pieces falling into place. Computer, what was the primary theater of operations for this war? The Orion arm of the galaxy centered around systems now designated as the Local Group, including the Sol system. Sol system was identified as a major strategic location during the conflict. Director Yexhal turned to his staff. Do you understand what this means? Humanity didn't develop their technology for fighting us. They developed it for fighting something that could eat entire star systems. Analyst Vexnor tentacled through more data. Sir, I'm finding references to something called the Final Coalition. Multiple species working together in the last phases of the war. What species? Most records are corrupted, but there are fragments. The Althari, the Zenkari, the Hegemony of Light, and something called the Human Resistance. The Human Resistance was still primitive 800 years ago. Sir, Vexnor said quietly, what if they weren't? What if our survey data was wrong? What if humanity has been spacefaring for 1,000 years and we just never knew it? The thought was staggering. The Empire prided itself on its intelligence networks, its complete knowledge of galactic civilization. The idea that an entire spacefaring species had operated undetected for centuries was almost unthinkable. Computer, Yexhal ordered, scan all historical databases for references to unexplained ship sightings, unknown technologies, or mysterious interventions. Cross-reference with the Sol system region. The search took 20 minutes. When it finished, the screen displayed hundreds of incidents across the past 3 centuries, ships appearing from nowhere to destroy pirate fleets, mysterious benefactors providing advanced technology to struggling colonies, unknown vessels rescuing survivors from disasters. They've been active the entire time, Coltum breathed. They've been operating in our space for centuries and we never noticed. Because we weren't looking for equals, Yexhal said grimly. We were looking for primitives to conquer or resources to exploit. We never considered that someone might be watching us. Analyst Vexnor pulled up another display. Sir, there's something else. The weapon technologies Captain Chen demonstrated. They're not just advanced. They're specifically designed to counter every type of defensive system the Empire uses. Meaning they've been studying our military technology for decades. Every weapon they showed us was perfectly calibrated to defeat Imperial defenses. They know exactly how our shields work, how our armor is constructed, how our weapons operate, while we know nothing about theirs. Exactly, sir. Director Yexhal stared at the accumulated data. 800 years ago, humanity had helped fight a war against something so terrible that the Empire's own records had been classified beyond his clearance level. Since then, they had been quietly operating in Imperial space, studying, learning, preparing. Computer, final query. What was the casualty rate during the Devourer War? Estimated galactic population loss, 78%. Estimated systems destroyed or rendered uninhabitable, 65%. War duration, approximately 400 years. The numbers hit the room like a physical blow. Humanity had survived a war that killed 3/4 of all life in the galaxy. They had fought for 4 centuries against an enemy that could destroy star systems. Sir, Koltum said quietly. What do we do with this information? Yexhal was quiet for a long moment. We recommend that the Empire find a different direction for expansion. Sir, Koltum, humanity spent 400 years fighting something that could eat planets. They survived a war that destroyed most of the galaxy. Do you really think our fleet is going to intimidate them? But the Empire has never been defeated. The Empire has never fought anyone who could fight back, Yexhal interrupted. We've conquered primitives and absorbed weaker civilizations. We've never faced a peer opponent, let alone one that cut their teeth fighting cosmic horrors. He turned to address the entire room. Humanity isn't just another species with advanced technology. They're survivors of an extinction-level war. Everything about them war. Their weapons, their tactics, their apparent confidence are. Makes sense if you understand what they've been through. What do we tell the Emperor? Director Yexhal considered the question carefully. We tell him that the Empire has encountered a species that is not suitable for conquest. We recommend establishing formal diplomatic relations and defining clear territorial boundaries. And if the Emperor demands military action? Yexhal looked at the data one more time. Weapons designed to fight galaxy destroyers. Technology developed over centuries of warfare. A species that had looked at 1 year later. The galaxy looked very different. Emperor Valthak stood on the observation deck of his palace, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so manageable. His 1,000 worlds were still his, but they no longer felt infinite. Somewhere out there, humanity was expanding, and every report made it clear that the Empire was no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. Your Majesty, Chancellor Mortex approached carefully. President Martinez has arrived for the treaty negotiations. The Emperor turned from the window. President Martinez. Not Supreme Leader, not Emperor, not even High Chancellor. President. Yes, Your Majesty. The humans seem to prefer simpler titles. Valthak almost smiled. After a year of dealing with humanity, he was beginning to understand that their simplicity was deceptive. They didn't need grand titles because their power spoke for itself. The delegation entered the throne room and Valthak studied President Martinez carefully. She was smaller than he'd expected, unremarkable by galactic standards. No ceremonial armor, no floating crown, no enhancement implants. She looked like she could be anyone. President Martinez, Valthak said formally, welcome to Zephyros Prime. Emperor Valthak, she replied with a slight nod. Thank you for agreeing to these negotiations. Thank you? Valthak found himself genuinely puzzled. President, you could have simply taken what you wanted. Your ships have demonstrated clear superiority. Martinez looked genuinely surprised. Emperor, why would we do that? We're not interested in conquest. Then what do you want? Security for our people, recognition of our territorial boundaries, and peaceful coexistence with our neighbors. Such a simple answer. But Valthak had learned not to underestimate human simplicity. In the past year, 3 Imperial sectors had attempted to test human resolve. The results had been educational. The Tau sector fleet had tried to blockade human trade routes. They lasted exactly 18 hours before being politely but firmly escorted back to Imperial space by ships that appeared out of nowhere. The Rigel military. Command had attempted a reconnaissance mission into human territory. Their scout ships were intercepted by vessels that seemed to materialize from empty space. The scouts were returned unharmed, along with detailed recordings of human defensive positions, a clear message that humanity could have destroyed them, but chose not to. Most disturbing of all, the Vega Sector governor had tried to stir up rebellion among human colonies, assuming they would be easy to manipulate. Instead, the rebels had been quietly contacted by human intelligence services and offered protection. Within a month, half the Vega Sector's client species were requesting human intervention in their local conflicts. President Martinez, Valthak said carefully, "Your people seem to have a talent for making friends," she smiled. "We've learned that allies are more valuable than subjects." It was true. In just 1 year, humanity had established formal relations with dozens of species that had been under imperial protection. Not through conquest or coercion, but by offering something the Empire never had: genuine partnership. The Centauri Trade Federation had signed an exclusive agreement with human merchants after imperial bureaucrats demanded a 400% increase in tribute. Human traders offered better prices and didn't require ceremonial submission. The Helix Confederation, absorbed by the Empire a century ago, had quietly declared independence and requested human assistance. Instead of military support, humans had provided economic aid and technological assistance. The Confederation was now more prosperous than it had been under imperial rule. "Your influence is spreading quite rapidly," Valthak observed. "People have choices now," Martinez replied simply. "Some choose to work with us. Others prefer existing arrangements. We respect both decisions. And if the Empire objects to this, competition?" President Martinez was quiet for a moment. "Emperor, we've been monitoring your fleet movements. You have approximately 12,000 ships spread across 1,000 systems. Impressive by any standard. But we've been building ships for 800 years. We've been preparing for war since before your empire existed. If you force a military confrontation, you will lose." The statement was delivered without emotion, without threat. It was simply a fact. "How many ships do you have?" Valthak asked. "Enough." The non-answer was somehow more intimidating than any number would have been. Valthak had learned that humans rarely bluffed, but they also rarely revealed their full capabilities. "What do you propose?" Martinez activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Blue areas marked imperial space, green showed human territory, and yellow indicated independent systems. Formal recognition of existing boundaries, trade agreements between our territories, joint cooperation on piracy and other mutual threats, and most importantly, an understanding that neither of us will interfere in the other's internal affairs. And the independent systems? They make their own choices. No forced conversions, no mandatory alliances. If they want imperial protection, they can have it. If they want human partnership, we're available. If they want to remain independent, we respect that. Valthak studied the map. It would mean the end of imperial expansion in 3 major directions. But it would also mean peace with an opponent the Empire couldn't defeat. "There is one thing I must ask," Valthak said. "Your weapons, your technology, where did it come from?" Martinez exchanged glances with her advisors. "You've done your research. You know about the Devourer War. We know it happened. The details are sparse. The Devourers were a hive mind that consumed organic matter and energy. They could strip a planet bare in weeks, turn entire solar systems into feeding grounds. For 400 years they spread across the galaxy, eating everything in their path. And humanity fought them. Humanity survived them, along with several other species. We learned to fight something that could destroy stars, Emperor. After that, conventional warfare seemed manageable. The implications hung in the air. No wonder human technology seemed so advanced. They developed it to fight cosmic horrors. Are they gone? The Devourers? We believe so. But we maintain deep space monitoring stations just in case. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Emperor. There are threats out there that make our little territorial dispute seem trivial. President Martinez gestured to her aide, who projected new star charts. 3 months ago, our long-range sensors detected anomalous activity in the Andromeda galaxy. Signatures that match old Devourer patterns. Valthak felt cold certainty settle in his stomach. Are you saying they're returning? We're saying the universe is bigger than our galaxy, and not everything out there is friendly. Humanity learned a long time ago that survival requires preparation. She turned off the display. That's why we want peace, Emperor. Not because we're afraid of the Empire, but because we have bigger concerns. If something like the Devourers ever returns, we'll need every ally we can get. The treaty negotiations continued for 3 days, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Empire would maintain its existing territory. Humanity would keep its expanding sphere of influence, and both sides would respect each other's sovereignty. When the documents were signed, Emperor Valthak found himself in the strange position of being grateful to maintain the status quo. As President Martinez prepared to leave, she turned back to him. Emperor, there's something else you should know. The indomitable HFY, the ship that first made contact with your fleet? Yes? It was a scout ship, a single vessel on a routine patrol mission. Valthak stared at her. A scout ship? We never intended a confrontation. Captain Chen was just supposed to establish peaceful contact and arrange formal negotiations. When your fleet surrounded her, she improvised. That demonstration of power, training weapons at minimum power, as she told your admiral. Captain Chen is actually quite proud that she managed the entire encounter without casualties. President Martinez smiled. I thought you should know. Humanity takes pride in proportional response. After the human delegation left, Emperor Valthak stood again on his observation deck. The stars looked the same, but everything had changed. The Empire was no longer alone, no longer the undisputed master of galactic civilization. Somewhere out there, humanity was building ships and watching for threats that could destroy star systems. Species across the galaxy were choosing partnership over subjugation, and deep in space, sensors watched for signs of ancient enemies that might return. 3 months later, Captain Sarah Chen received new orders. Long-range monitoring stations in the void between galaxies had detected energy signatures that matched archived devourer patterns. The signals were distant, barely detectable, but they were there. Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, now flagship of the 3rd Deep Space Fleet. Around her, 200 human warships prepared for a journey that would take them beyond the galactic rim. Orders from command, her communications officer reported. Proceed to grid reference Omega-7. Investigate anomalous readings. Rules of engagement are flexible, Chen smiled. After 800 years of peace, humanity was preparing for war again. But this time they wouldn't be alone. The treaty with the Empire included mutual defense clauses. Several independent species had already offered ships,